Frank Turek, we're excited to have you on the show today. A lot to talk about. You've been in this faith game for a long time, and we have a lot we want to pick your brain on. But one of the things that's interesting to me is kind of just watching all this revival, this conversation. Not everybody loves the word revival, but watching people come to faith in droves, all these young people, and it's really encouraging. And yet, I think there are questions, and some people have concerns. And when you look at what is happening, and feel free to talk about the positives, but what are some of the concerns you have about how to sort of foster that revival once it's sort of happening?
Yeah, and the question is, are we in revival right now? I do notice that church attendance is up about 15% and Bible sales are way up. I hope a revival is going on. It certainly seems like there's more interest in Christianity. I think one of the ways that we need to move this forward is to ensure that people are getting not just spiritual renewal, but they become disciples. And of course, as you know, Billy, that's the hardest thing. How do you make disciples? How do you make people that actually follow Jesus? Not just people that say, I got fire insurance, I'm going to heaven. Jesus didn't say, come make believers. He said, come make disciples. And that means carrying your cross. And doing things that you might not normally want to do. It means denying yourself and following him. And that's hard. None of us really want to do that in our natural selves. It's going to take some sort of spiritual renewal to get us to go from just saying, oh yeah, I trust in Jesus, to actually following Jesus, even through difficulty.
Yeah. I mean, when I look out there and I see all of this, and I love what you said there. Like, are we even in revival? Because I think that's kind of the question. Like, everybody's using the term, but it's like, I don't know. A lot of people have talked about the end times as well. I just had Franklin Graham on. We were talking, are things going to get worse? Are they going to get better? You have all these theological debates that are going on. Can you have a world where you have things getting better in some ways, like, quote unquote, revival wise, while things are still denigrating and falling apart? Like, can those two things exist, I guess, at the same time?
Yeah, well, I would venture to say that no one knows when Jesus is coming back. And my source on that is Jesus. So, when people keep saying, oh, yeah, I know he's coming back, oh, things are getting worse, it's going to happen. And I say, hold on. Jesus said, no one knows the day, the hour, the times, nor the season. I'm coming like a thief in the night. So anyone who says, I know when he's coming back, he can't come back then, right? So whenever he comes back, it could be today, it could be 10,000 years from now. And I think it's veiled for a reason, Billy.
Yeah.
Because just like Jesus's first coming, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2 that if these things were known, that the forces of this world never would have crucified the Lord of glory. When you look back on Old Testament prophecy in the light of the New Testament, you go, oh, now I see how all these passages fit together. But looking forward, if you're in the Old Testament, you don't really know this is going to happen. And if Satan knew that murdering Jesus was actually Satan's defeat, he never would have instigated it. And so the Lord kept that coming veiled for a reason. It would have changed our behavior in a negative way if we had known too specifically looking forward. I think the same is true with the second coming. I mean, if we knew Jesus was going to come back and say 2034, what would most people do? They'd go, I've got time. Right? At 2033, I'll start running up the credit cards. And then I'll repent right at the last minute and I'll be with Jesus. I mean, no one knows. No one knows. What?
One thing that blows my mind is people that say they follow Jesus and they know that they read the Bible, they know God. But when people, like all these false prophets across the world, want to predict the end time, then everybody, like where was it? Was it Nigeria where that one prophet was like a few months ago? Where they all just gathered in the woods and just waited for it to come. Then they were all just like signing, in disbelief that it didn't happen. And there's people here sold all their property, sold their house, sold everything. I'm like, how do you claim to, love Jesus and, know the Bible and then just go and believe somebody that said this? I mean, this has been happening. It's longer than I've been alive, but I've seen it a lot of times since I've been born. It's just a bit, it kills me.
why would you sell anything if he's coming back? What does it matter?
I
if
know
he's
it don't
selling
make
anything?
sense. Does not make sense.
Well, they'll sell their stuff and then they'll go buy I mean, in New York, this happened with Harold Camping. When that whole thing went down, people were selling their stuff and they were buying billboards, I think, and like putting the money to tell everybody, hey, you need to be ready for this particular day. I mean, literally date setting when we're told not to do that. It's deceptive, though. I mean, this is what the enemy does, though. You were saying that like killing, stealing, destroying, confusing, right? I mean, that's what leads people to date set, does it not, Frank?
Oh, I think so. And look, I'm not on the planning committee. I'm on the welcoming committee. So I'm just welcoming Jesus coming. Whenever he comes, he comes. You know what I am more certain of, and everybody should be more certain of, that my end and your end is much more certain than when Jesus is going to come to end everything. In other words, everybody listening to us right now, you know you're going to die within the next 100 years, probably a lot sooner than that. You know that's going to happen. My question is, what are you doing about that? Why are you worried about when Jesus is coming back? Because when Jesus is coming back, it could be in our lifetimes, but it might not be in our lifetimes. But you know your life's going to end here on earth. You better deal with that instead of worrying about when he's going to come to end the whole show.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, one of the things, okay, so all these people coming to faith, which is super exciting. I love it. And to your point, you got to make disciples. You know, there's a lot that comes with that. When you look at the church right now, and I know this is probably a loaded question, but I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I want to hear what you have to say. Again, a lot of things to be excited about, but there's a lot where you kind of say, well, what's going on? There's some dysfunction. There are some issues. When you look out at the church, not the world, what's got you kind of concerned right now? What are the biggest issues that have you maybe wondering, okay, what's happening here?
Well, a couple of things that have me concerned is we're not making disciples, as I mentioned, but secondly, we don't teach people why Christianity is true. We just tell them you ought to believe it. And that kind of faith is very fragile, because if you come to faith in Jesus on emotion, you can leave him on emotion. But if you come to Jesus on facts don't change. You know, you could still walk away, but you'll know in your heart, well, I'm walking away from the truth, right? Of course, the scriptures tell us to have an answer for the hope that we have, to have reasons for why we believe what we believe. And it just makes sense. I mean, why should you be a Christian and not an atheist or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist, or make up your own world religion or your own personal religion like so many people do today? The reason you ought to be a Christian is because it's true. Because there's evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is telling the truth, that you're a fallen human being and so am I, and that we can't pay for our own iniquities, that someone who lived a perfect life in our place can be our substitute. Because Christianity is all about substitution. It's not about doing good works. You do good works after you're saved, not to be saved. As Martin Luther famously said, you're saved by faith alone, but your faith is not alone. So we need to teach people the truth and why it's true. And the second thing that concerns me is this, Billy, is that people think that Christianity is just for Sundays and it's not for everything else you do. Christianity should affect how you behave, obviously, in church, how you behave at home, how you behave at work, how you behave online, how you behave in the voting booth. Okay, people somehow think that politics isn't important to Christianity. No, politics is part of life, and we have to be engaged politically for at least two reasons. Number one, politics affects our ability to live and preach the gospel. So when pastors say, oh, I don't get involved in politics, I just preach the gospel, I tell them, I guess you don't think the gospel is very important then. They say, what do you mean? Well, can you start a church in North Korea? No, of course you can't, because politically they won't allow it. Do you know there's no First Baptist Church of Tehran? There's no Calvary Chapel of Mecca. Why not? Because politically they don't allow it. And we're so used to having the First Amendment here in the United States, we think, we're immune to having our religious freedoms taken away. Oh no, there was just a group of people that barged into a Minnesota church this past week trying to take away religious freedom. When are we going to wake up and say that what we do politically affects the gospel? That's number one. Number two, we're commanded to love our neighbor. How do you love your neighbor? You put laws in place that protect them from evil. And who's supposed to do that? We're supposed to do that. Politics affects policy and policy affects people. So we have to be engaged politically. So I'm afraid that A, we're not making disciples. I'm afraid B, we're not telling people why Christianity is true. And C, we're not telling people that Christianity is 24/7, 365, every area of your life, including politics.
One thing I'll touch on, especially my generation, and I've seen it a lot. For one, I've watched you for at least 10 years or so. So I watch a lot of your debates, and a lot of people in my generation, I'm 27, like a lot of my close friends, they're so stuck on like needing the hard evidence like directly in front of them. So for instance, like they, in a conversation that I've had in a couple years ago with one of my buddies, they're stuck on the fact that all these gods came before Jesus, like the Egyptian gods, things like that. And I'm like, well, it's not real true. You haven't really looked into the actual story behind Jesus and all that. But yeah, my generation, I've noticed, there's a lot of them coming to Christ, but there's a lot of them really still stuck on like, well, I need the legit hard facts, the hard evidence in front of me for me to believe. And I've seen you debate people that you can give them all the information that they could know to believe. And they're just like, nah, I don't know.
Well,
like you said, they want to be their own God.
Yeah, that's true. There's a couple of questions you can ask somebody like that. The first question is, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Yeah.
And if people are honest, they'll say no, because it's not a head problem, it's a heart problem. They don't want it to be true because then they can't be God over their own lives. So you can always ask that question. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? But then secondly, people who claim they're all about evidence, ask them if they have evidence for what they believe right now. Like, oh, you believe that the universe exploded into being out of nothing by nothing? There's no God? What evidence do you have for that? When have you ever seen anything explode into being out of nothing by nothing without a cause? Never. And yet you believe that by faith. Okay. So you claim you're all about evidence, but your own worldview, what you believe right now, you have no evidence for.
Yeah.
So don't give me all this nonsense about how you're all about the evidence, because what you believe right now has no evidence behind it.
Gosh, you're making me think of something else, because you know this, Frank, better than anybody, because you've been in every one of these debates. A lot of these people will then say, well, then where did God come from, right? And so and then you move into this conversation, and I'd love for you to talk about that, because I think there's some really good answers to it, but I'll let you kind of take it.
Sure. Well, let's just talk about one argument for the existence of God, and that is known as the cosmological argument, the argument from the beginning of the universe. The evidence shows that space, time, and matter had a beginning out of nothing. And even atheists agree with this. And Stephen Hawking famously said, who was an atheist, he said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. So he's admitting the evidence for the creation of the universe out of nothing. Now, of course, Hawking didn't think God did it. He tried to come up with another explanation. He failed, but here's the data. Space, time, and matter had a beginning. If space, time, and matter had a beginning, what could have created space, time, and matter? Only something outside of space, time, and matter. In other words, something spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons can make choices. And of course, the cause would also have to be intelligent to have a mind to make a choice. So I always ask people this question. When you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? And they will say, well, God. Yeah, that exactly. Now, we don't know it's the Christian God at this point. It could be the Christian God, but it could be Allah or some other theistic or deistic God. You have to see if Jesus rose from the dead to see if it's the Christian God. But let's just say we have some sort of theistic God out there. Okay, some sort of being out there, a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent being that created this universe and fine-tuned it. If you're timeless, do you have a beginning? No, you don't have a beginning. So if you're timeless, you don't have a beginning, which means you don't have a cause. So the question, who made God, is a stupid question, because God is not caused, because the definition of God is the uncaused first cause, what Aristotle might call the unmoved mover. There has to be an uncaused first cause. You can't go on an infinite regress of causes. So if you're talking about a created God, you're not talking about the God of the universe. You may be talking about a God that Dalton brought up earlier, like some sort of finite God, like some, Osiris or Zeus or Thor or somebody, a finite God inside the universe. But when you're talking about the infinite God outside the universe, that God has no beginning. That God will have no end. That God just bees. In other words, as the Bible puts it, the great I am. The great I am, the being that had no beginning, the being that will have no end, the being that just bees, that is the ground of all other being. In fact, it may be helpful for our audience to set aside the word God for a second, because we know God is not his name. God is just a word we use to refer to the source and sustainer of all things. Just ask yourself the question, who is the source and sustainer of all things? It's not me. It's not you. It's not the universe. The universe had a beginning. The source and sustainer of all things must transcend the universe. And that being is outside of time, which means that being didn't have a cause, which means who made God is stupid. Stupid question.
Frank, why are you brilliant? Why are you so brilliant? Honestly.
No, my mentor, Dr. Norman Geisler, forgot more than I'll ever know. That guy, when he died, they figured out he wrote or co-wrote or updated 129 books.
What?
Yeah, 129 books. Yeah.
Wow.
He's written more books than most people have seen. Who goes to the library anymore? Nobody, right?
I accidentally walked into the library the other day.
You went into, you were like, what is this thing? This is like a thing this is a relic from the past. A library? Yeah. The library right now is right here. What are you talking about? There's the library.
Literally. Mm-hmm. I was going to say earlier, when you're getting to like trying to explain like where God came from, I ain't gonna lie, my brain starts hurting because it's very hard to like, because I want to think about those things, but once I start thinking about it, I'm like, everything just starts intertwining in my head, and I'm like, I'm gonna lose my mind if I keep trying to figure out like the start of God.
Well, it is hard to imagine an infinite God, but it would be strange if an infinite God wasn't strange to us.